Mayor, Council, this evening I'm happy to make a second presentation to you all regarding this time environmental code. And as you well know, I do this once every quarter to show Council our progress and some of our achievements in code enforcement, and then also seek feedback or answer any questions regarding some of our activities for code from Council. So just, again, just a brief overview. I'm going to go over our third quarter statistics, highlight some of our trending and forecasting that we see regarding code enforcement, and again, just seek any kind of questions or feedback from Council. Third quarter, you can see, is highlighted in yellow. We saw just a little bit more than 10,600 proactive code. This is where our code officers go out. They survey their areas, and then they send notice of violations for violations that are observed. We have a separate statistic in which we capture any type of work that we do regarding any type of request or complaints that we receive from residents. But this number shows our staff is out there being as aggressive as possible. One dip in our number, as you've heard Mr. Holzappel from Public Works allude in previous presentations, is that the high incidence of rain or precipitation this past spring impacted some of their work. Well, it also impacts staff going out and looking for violations. So that is one thing that did impact our overall proactiveness in our community. We did see a slight increase in complaints. Again, this can be attributed to probably residents not thinking or feeling that we were addressing some issues fast, but I can assure you we got out there as quickly as we can. The number of properties that we contracted declined. Again, our contractor has to have favorable weather to conduct work out in the areas. But you do see an increase in citations. And I've reported to Council that the one violation in which we have seen a huge increase over the past year is that of issuing citations for parking on unimproved surfaces. So we continue to see a high number of citations issued for that violation. Year to date, we are doing really well. You did see the quarterly numbers dip, but as far as year to date numbers, code enforcement has proactively identified over 30,000 violations in the community. This is done with 9 staff members that are assigned code areas, 2 supervisors, and a manager. So this is a very encouraging number that our staff is out there. Again, I've reported or stated to Council that it does take some time. Proactive code does take time for community members to start seeing huge strides, and I think that we continue to break down as far as the community in bite-sized pieces, if you will, on achieving community-wide compliance. You see the overall instances of citations, almost 1,400 citations issued for the year. That's a very big increase over previous years. This breakdown is by month, so you see our April, May, and June numbers displayed there, as well as on the right-hand side, you see the number of complaints submitted by residents. As you can see, overall, we do see some trending as far as complaints being reduced over time, especially when you look at the past 3 years. April and May, again, not to belabor the point, but those months we were impacted by staff not being able to go out and probably see some of the violations due to rain and other instances. So we do anticipate or attribute a slight increase to that. But June, it started to, weather was a little bit more favorable, and you can see our numbers declined for that month. As far as case management, this was actually something that I've harped on, and I had to give credit to Mr. Kahili on asking the question, well, how effective is our staff? And we came up with this indicator. So you can see We hold steady from last year when you look at overall, 23 days from the point when a code officer initiates a code case to when it's been resolved. And that resolution could be a citation, property is contracted, or we get voluntary compliance from the resident. So in which our inspectors go out and look and inspect and find that information. So 23 days is aggressive. Our next step probably in the next year that I will work with Ms. Martinez on is probably looking at what our number is comparable to some other cities to make sure that we are being aggressive in our community. Methods of compliance. You've heard me talk about the three primary methods, and that's voluntary compliance, contractor abatements, where a city contractor is hired to resolve the issue on the city's behalf. We place a lien on the property after the work is completed, and citations. As you see, having and I always brag on our community in having such a high level of voluntary compliance. 87% is really something to be proud of, and this is our staff working with residents to resolve issues before the city has to step in. So 87% is something that I feel is something that we can be proud of. Citations, again, breaking down that 409 citations issued. This gives you an idea. Sometimes it could take upwards from 60 days or greater to get a resident on the code docket, go through the various processes of resolving an issue through the municipal court system. But as you can see, in this last quarter, 5.74% as far as dismissed by prosecutor. This, I like to brag on our prosecutors a little bit for a moment. In an average that is acceptable as far as that is normal is about 11%. So 5.74% shows that our prosecutors are being aggressive when we meet with residents. Aggressive and fair, I like to say. So this is something that they work very hard to ensure that they work with residents on. Top 4 violations, just if you're curious, it's not a shocker to see anything vegetative in nature as being our top violations for this past quarter. So high weeds and grass, as well as overhanging limb, accounted for a majority of our work. Just to give you some perspective as far as some things that our code officers see. This was a violation in which included an inoperable vehicle, nuisance premise, as well as trash and debris. And so it was identified on June the 3rd, and by June the 12th, we had complete compliance. So this is a thing that and the success story that we like to see as far as in code, is when we can work with residents to resolve these issues. Another example is fences. This time of year is a good time for us to focus on violations like this, especially as our vegetative season starts to wrap up. It's a focus on some of our more complex violations, and fences is one. So this illustrates a success story off of Caribou Court in our community. Our code ambassadors, which we have some code ambassadors in the audience now. I always say that any bit helps, and our code ambassadors give their time. While they only saw a 37.94 compliance rate this past quarter, we really couldn't do this without their support. They address some of the more common code violations like high weeds and grass in our community, and then it's referred to our code officer. So this past quarter, they gave over 104 hours of their time to assist our community on making it a more attractive and safer community, and I'd like to thank them as far as for their work. This past spring class, we graduated 17 new ambassadors. This is our second largest class that we've graduated. Our first one was our inaugural class, which we saw 30 or so graduate, so 17. We are really excited about putting these volunteers on the street and assisting us throughout our community. Vacant property maintenance program. Again, I just give this slide just to give a good idea of where we're at as far as vacant properties in our community. And this is something that assists us as far as addressing some of the more common issues associated with vacant properties, particularly trash and debris and high weeds and grass. Essentially, property owners get 2 strikes, and then the third time we contract on an annual, or utilize an annual contract to resolve issues on the resident's behalf or property owner's behalf, and then we then attach a lien to those properties. So it's a living document. So as you can see, we saw a slight increase in the number, 685. And we anticipate this number continually fluctuating as the year goes on. I covered this as far as in the previous slide. One thing that I like to also point out is that we have adopted a model in which we do a comprehensive multi-departmental sweep of at least one area each quarter. In this instance, we identified some neighborhoods up north in which off Sandra Lynn, and as a reference point, in which we identified 210 code cases, and out of that were 603 violations. So the goal is that each quarter we look at data that indicates any type of increase, abnormal increase in violations or complaints, and making those our decision point on where we're going to do a comprehensive sweep. But usually it involves, as I said, multiple departments, police, building inspections, and animal services are some partner agencies in which we enlist when we do a comprehensive sweep. So just briefly, that was our statistics for our third quarter. I'd be happy to answer any questions from council.
Thank you, Mr. Rivas. Is there any questions on this presentation this evening? Yes, sir. Mr. Councilman Archer.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rivas, we've spoken before about a concern that I've had, and it must be getting better because I'm not getting as many complaints about it. Just generally, in the past, there's been concerns occasionally, but perhaps a resident had gotten a notice and there were some things they weren't quite sure what they were supposed to do, and just making sure that they would get the emails back or phone calls back. And again, I haven't had any complaints about that lately, so perhaps we've made progress there, and I'm grateful for that. Then occasionally there might be a situation where a resident had said that they'd gotten a notice on something, and then the contractors were there the next day or two, and they didn't have a chance. And slip-ups happen, mistakes are made. And again, haven't had that complaint as much either lately. And then occasionally, perhaps a senior person who is in the hospital or has been moved to a senior facility, and their adult children did not get a chance to see the notice or whatnot. And I think my point in saying these things is just we continue to be empathetic and understanding, and work with folks where we can, which I know that we do, but those are just some things that were on my mind tonight.
Our goal is to provide exceptional customer service as much as we can, and when folks communicate with us, we are more than happy to work with them.
Well, as I said, I haven't had many of those concerns voiced lately, so obviously some things are getting done correctly. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the work.
Thank you. Anything else for? Yes, sir.
Mr. Rivas, thank you for your presentation tonight. I think you mentioned in your presentation also there's been an increase of vehicles on unimproved surfaces. So I guess on grass, on curbs, that type of thing. And that's on the increase over a couple of quarters. Is that what you're saying?
I would say I think the instances where we issue citations has increased. That is a violation, as you might know, occurs outside of an 8 to 5 schedule. It either happens late at night or early in the morning. So what I've done is work with staff, and where we have 2 staff members that alternate their schedule. So they either come in early some portions of the week, or they stay late some portions of the week. And that's why we're finding the violation more, is because we're working outside of the normal 8 to 5 business day to find violations. So I really don't have a good data point as far as reference for you, as far as if we've seen an increase in that violation specifically. We're just catching it more often because we've adjusted the way that we look for those violations.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question about how you're addressing it, if you're seeing it on the increase, and if there are areas where maybe they're not informed about that, they don't know about that particular code or how it's being handled. So, okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilman O'Shea?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rivas, thank you very much for the continued leadership that you've shown with regard to the Code Ambassador Program. I think you've done a really good job of supporting that program, and I think it's actually been a very good deployment of some willing volunteers and has been very successful. So I really appreciate the leadership that you've taken and the way you've empowered folks to help own their community.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Rivas.